The companies winning with AI aren't the ones with the biggest budgets. They're the ones who are starting right now. If you've been waiting for someone to cut through the noise and show you exactly how AI could transform your work, your wait is over. Your competitors have already signed up. I'm Kenny, founder of Brim and the host of the AI Opportunity.
Welcome back to the AI Opportunity. I'm Kenny, your host. Super excited this week to have Allegra Guinan join us. I think this is going to be a really exciting episode. AI Opportunities obviously focused on lifting back the curtain on what's really happening in the world of AI so that it's less mysterious to leaders, executives, and people making those important decisions around AI in their businesses. So Allegra's background includes actually being on the technical side of machine learning for more than a decade, working at some of the most innovative businesses in San Francisco, and now running Lumiera, which is really missioned and focused on AI education, which I think is going to be super, super exciting to talk about. Allegra, maybe you can introduce yourself to the guests and tell us a bit more about you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so as you said, I built my career in US tech. I was living in San Francisco for quite some time and around California, now based in Lisbon, Portugal. So focusing on the European region primarily. And I co-founded Lumiera with an amazing person named Emma about 2 years ago. And we decided to address the AI literacy gap at the executive level. We did start more in traditional AI strategy, I would say. And we realized that there was this growing gap in terms of how executives were navigating the space and the information they needed to know to successfully lead their organizations around AI. So we created this program, the AI Leadership Accelerator, that is now our core offering, where we take executives through 16 weeks of hands-on development to address some of the main challenges that leaders are facing in the space right now.
Brilliant. I mean, one thing we know for sure from sort of being in the market is there is just so much noise out there. And actually, it's so hard to distill what is important and what isn't important. Really something that I think you said the first time we spoke, which is around like AI. Executives don't need to be experts for AI. I think a lot of companies, they worry about the technical bar and the expertise needed. I think you suggested that actually executives just need to be good decision makers. So what do you mean by that, if you don't mind, Allegra, maybe unpacking that a little bit, because I thought it was a very interesting point.
Yeah, of course. I mean, the role of an executive is to lead their organization and ensure their company's success through strategic decisions, and that does not mean being an AI expert. And even that term is quite loaded in a way, because somebody can spend their entire career focusing on one vertical of AI. It's an extremely large field with many different opportunities and pockets to explore. So it's almost impossible to be running your organization as an executive if you're not already, let's say, an AI company, while also simultaneously knowing everything there is to know about AI. So that is not the bar for entry for being a good AI leader or a good leader in general. As you said, it's about making the right decisions, and that means being informed. So if you are a confident AI leader, it means you understand the core concepts of the technology. You know what it means for your organization, how technology works in practice versus in theory, and how to navigate a really quickly evolving environment. And so there's a lot more in that area than just knowing everything there is to know about AI. That won't make you necessarily a better leader.
I think it's a really excellent point. I think confidence in particular is something that, what do we all say? Imposter syndrome seems to be rife across businesses and across executives. Are there things that you would suggest that could really help executives and leaders with building confidence when it comes to how to implement AI across their business?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, executives have built their way up. They are senior leaders. They know their organizations inside and out. There are moments in their career, surely, where they're really proud of the way that they led and the decisions that they made. So how do you harness that understanding of yourself and of your business and just pair it with a stronger understanding of this particular technology and how it relates to your space, so that you can walk into a room and be strategic and truly informed about what you're saying and participate in the conversation? So again, back to this thing of not having to know everything there is to know. It's more about how can you clearly see where there are vulnerabilities, where there are gaps, where you do have a strong sense of what you need to do. And these are things that probably you've encountered in your career at some point, related to some other technology or some other domain. So just reflecting back on what made you who you are today in your role and creating a sort of mantra or set of principles that you can stand on related to where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really fascinating point that you make, which is that actually being a growth person is somewhat proven by having been an executive or a leader in an organization. If you've gone through a career where you've seen that growth in your role, seniority start to arrive, you've had to learn lots of new things, right? You've had to learn new technologies, new approaches, new systems, new mental models. Just by the very nature of the career progression you've had. So, yeah, treating AI exactly the same is a really nice framing. I guess the worry a lot of people have, though, is that AI feels overly technical, right? It's quite scary, right? And if you're a COO of a medium-sized business and you've got a million other things to do, and then suddenly you're tasked with learning around a space that you imagine is so cutting edge that it's beyond your comprehension. What could you help our audience with when it comes to kind of the mindset shifts that they need to kind of overcome some of those challenges around those barriers, which are very real,
Yeah,
Allegra?
I think helping people understand what AI is to begin with and showing them areas of their life where they have already been interacting with AI, probably for quite some time. If they've ever used a ride sharing app like Uber, if they've ever used Gmail and had it sort through their spam. I mean, there are so many ways that machine learning and artificial intelligence is used in our day to day through applications, and sort of breaking down what seems like an extremely complicated, over technical domain and helping people see the very practical solutions that they might already be aware of. So that's one thing. And then the other is that you don't need to know everything. Again, back to the not needing to be an AI expert, you can just understand how it relates to your space and tackle it one bit at a time. So what we try to focus on the most is identifying your problem spaces. So what you should know as a leader is where the challenges and the friction points are within your organization or your part of the organization. And once you're able to really clearly identify those, you know what needs to be resolved in order to meet your goals. You see where things could be accelerated, where you need stronger infrastructure, where you need new teammates or expertise. If you can identify all of those things and you can define success around all of them, surely there is a technology that exists. It might be AI that could solve those problems for you. So it's more focusing on where you see the challenges are in your specific space and then seeking out the technology to solve those problems rather than trying to, you know, stare at AI and not know where to start or try to absorb everything and then reverse it into the problems you might have. It's a lot more about finding the problem first and then seeing what the solution is.
No, I love that, and I guess I would summarize that as being two things really, which is really your learning journey should be informed by your need and problems, which I think is just really really sage advice. And I guess the second point there, which is also really powerful, is that actually it's okay that it's incremental. It's not everything at once. You don't need to, like you say, you don't need to be an AI expert at all, but actually you don't need to know a huge area of machine learning or AI to start having value around that learning. It can be an incremental journey, and that's probably the best type of journey to go on anyway, right? I suspect, Allegra?
Yes, definitely. I think just knowing the right questions to ask, being very honest about what you don't know. If you're an executive, if you're a leader, you should be quite familiar with hiring for your teams, delegating responsibilities, and being honest about where you need to fill in those gaps will help you be a better leader. Somebody on your team should probably be an AI expert. Somebody should know what the technology that's needed and how to build it, how to deploy it, how to manage and maintain it. You need those people in the organization. But in order to find those people, in order to really know the correct solutions that you're going for or how it should look, you need to know which questions to ask. And so there is a core understanding you need to have. And back to this thing of the confident AI leadership, there is a level of literacy that's extremely important, which is why we're doing what we're doing at Lumiera. But you don't need to be the only person that knows all of that. It's not efficient to try to take on everything within your organization. That's why you hire other people and you build out your teams.
Yeah, I think this is a great point, and it's interesting because it sort of segues into a theme I wanted to ask you about, which is actually what does AI readiness look like? I think previously you discussed that AI education is the foundation of AI readiness, which I love. It's quite a pithy way to describe it, but actually intuitively feels really, really correct. In terms of organizations and helping organizations to build that AI readiness across the organization and the confidence before they even start building, what are the sorts of things that you see companies do well, or that you've done in the past to kind of help companies make that journey?
Yeah, so there are a couple parts of our program that I think summarize this really well. Something that we do in our last foundation of the program, which is focused on ROI, is we try to identify AI opportunities within an organization. This is quite easy for some people because they already have an idea of what they thought that they want to use AI for. And then we break down the variables that are required to make that successful. And that's where organizations and leaders start to see potential gaps that they need to fill and identify what is a valid opportunity versus not, and what can be a short or long-term opportunity. So for example, do you have the data readiness for this particular AI solution you have in mind? Do you have data quality and governance, even if the data is ready and available? Do you have the right expertise on your team in order to deploy and maintain that? Do you have the infrastructure in place and the resources and financial stability in order to see that through, depending on the model that you decide to build out there? So there are a lot of different variables that go into AI success. It's not just, okay, we've bought the solution, we're ready to go, especially if you're trying to build in-house, for example. And so breaking that down into all of these pieces and having a leader rate where they think they are for all of these different variables, and then seeing altogether if they are actually ready for that opportunity or where they might need to put more resources or time or ask more questions to find out if they're ready. That is extremely powerful across an organization. And it does bring people sort of into reality from where they think they want to be with AI into what their organization is actually set up to do right now.
Yeah, that's really, really clear. And I guess you must see a lot of executives have those almost like epiphany moments, right? Where they're suddenly being armed with these new tools and they have that grounded knowledge. Maybe just to add a bit of meat to the bones, as they say, it'd be really good if you could give us an example of, say, an executive you worked with, obviously totally anonymously, where maybe they've had a moment where they've suddenly reframed their thinking around how AI could help their organization, or they've had a realization that is going to have a quite significant return on the organization. Yeah, just would be awesome for the audience to see what that can look like in practice, what that reward is that education can really offer.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the outcomes of our program is this AI strategy artifact. It's essentially a mini portfolio of AI use cases that have been validated. And it breaks down the change management approach, the risk identification and mitigation strategy, all of the technical dependencies and non-technical dependencies, etc. So it's a very comprehensive artifact that one gets and builds throughout our program. And what's interesting from the last cohort we ran is that almost everybody ended up with a couple of non-technical projects as part of their portfolio, and that was more around AI adoption and readiness within the organization and not a technical solution. Because once they went through these exercises that we just talked about, in terms of, oh, actually, this is a lot higher risk than we're ready for. I don't know how to answer all of these questions right now around data. I don't actually know what the technical dependencies are. That epiphany that we just talked about causes a choice around more human transformation, which is extremely effective. So if you're trying to kick off your AI portfolio and you have some short and long-term opportunities, some of those should be focused on the change management, culture of learning, and actual people side of your workforce. And you need those things in order to build the capabilities and readiness for the technical solutions down the line. So that is a sort of surprise not surprising for us necessarily, but I think surprising for leaders to realize that once they actually go through all of the steps of breaking down the solutions that they have in mind, they end up spending a lot more time on the cultural transformation side of things.
Yeah, it's something that we can kind of echo your thoughts with. It's often overlooked how significant the human transformation is. And I say significant not as a loaded term, as in it means it's so difficult for executives, but in the sense that it's such an important part of technology adoption, right? One thing that we hear often from executives is, okay, well, I want to implement this new technology. It's going to save this team 20 or 30% of their time and capacity, but many of my team are going to be scared out of their wits about AI coming in and disrupting the work that they've done for maybe 10 plus years. How do you help executives broach that human side of the transformation? Is that part of some of the sort of concepts and frameworks that you're offering? And what have you seen succeed?
Yeah, so that's actually where we start. A lot of executives would prefer that we start with the ROI side, but we do this on purpose and we really start with the culture and change management and the confident leadership aspects first. And the best way to do this is to really know your workforce. So you mentioned productivity. This is one of the metrics that gets thrown around a lot with AI. We will use it to become more productive. We will have all this time, but most leaders don't actually have the baseline metrics for productivity, how much time is being spent on specific workflows, how often are we following our SOPs versus not. There are so many different non-happy paths that are actually being taken day to day within the organization across all teams that sort of go under the radar. So when you start to add in AI, you might not even be solving a problem that you think you are for your team, and that can cause this sort of resentment or fear that you're describing because suddenly technology is coming in and imposing something that is not actually related to their work potentially. So the best way to do this is to engage directly with the workforce and not saying, where do you want to use AI, in your day to day, because those people might not know what AI can do for them, but rather, what are the challenges you face every day? What do you spend time on that you wish you didn't? How would you feel more empowered in your work, etc.? So back to the problem space, really having honest conversations and regular conversations with an entire workforce and hearing what their challenges are, and then trying to address those with technical solutions rather than sort of imposing something from the top down, which can cause this negative culture around AI adoption.
Yeah, we've seen that firsthand. If you don't bring along your team and who you manage, it can be really quite difficult for everyone in organizations. And I think it's a really interesting point that you make, because a trend that we see a lot is actually really getting into an organization and getting them using AI and deriving value. Often is the people at the front line who are doing the like standard operating procedures as you described. And so it's a really interesting tension actually. And I can see how it would have huge value just helping everyone be on the same page to start with, right? And do you do that just from a perspective of helping people understand the mindset, or are there tools that you offer to the executives? And what happens post working with executives? I mean, and some of the executives you work with are, 1,000+ person companies, 100-person companies, 50-person companies. So it's a broad range. Is there ongoing support, and what sort of support do executives need on an ongoing basis post kind of getting that AI confidence, which is, I think, a nice description?
Yeah, I'll break down that question and sort of answer in what I heard. So starting with how we promote engagement with the workforce, we do have proprietary frameworks that we've built throughout the entire program, and this is one of them. So the kinds of questions that you need to start asking different teams, the way to start building a culture of shared learning. And we do have approaches that we help leaders use in order to most effectively do this, and how to set them up. So let's say we're going through the 16-week program. At the beginning, they're asking the right questions, they're starting to engage, so that at the end, when they're starting to validate opportunities, they do have qualitative data based on their actual organization, rather than getting to the point of saying, oh, these are opportunities, and now then having to go back and start talking to their workforce about them. So rather setting them up for success from the beginning and having those conversations to start actually measuring the problem spaces so that later on you have actual data to use in order to validate your opportunities. So that's one part. And then the post-program support. We are a boutique advisory firm, so we do offer ongoing advisory for leaders. They can directly connect with us, and we have a tiered approach to our program. Some offer more direct support than others. I get this question a lot, like, why would we choose you versus some Big Four consulting firm or some other implementation specialist? And we are not replacing those. We are trying to be upstream to really directly support leaders in their decision making. So if after going through this program, you are now able to very confidently and effectively have a strategic conversation, you know the right questions to ask, you know how to properly research your industry as it relates to AI, you can then go to a consulting firm and know exactly what to say to them and how to figure out what is hype versus not, which vendors to evaluate, what is actually real when you're looking at new AI features for your organization. And for implementation, sort of what works in practice versus in theory, what is the most effective technology for your use case. You are more set up to put your resources in the right place because you have all of this core knowledge now. So we are being more upstream and more directly connected with executives to be their right hand as they're going through this and navigating the space.
Yeah, that's really clear. And I guess that confidence has many vectors, right? There's the confidence for the individual who's gone through the executive program with yourselves. There's the confidence that their teams will have when they learn how to bring them along. And then there's this confidence, which is really about accountability to the business, because I guess what you're really able to enable is for that executive to build a compelling business case, one that is grounded in return for the company, which ultimately is the big challenge at the moment, right? For a lot of companies with AI, everyone's excited about AI. Like you say, there's huge amounts of hype. It seems like there's a new AI product every 5 minutes, right? But it's so hard to navigate a space with so much noise. And I think for a lot of executives, what we're seeing is that it's also hard to decide when is the right moment. It's like, when is that payoff high enough? And actually being able to figure out what payoff even looks like for a lot of organizations is really difficult unless you've already got really good infrastructure in place for measuring how your business runs and knowing your processes. So I can really see, Allegra, how that's really powerful for a lot of leaders. Where do leaders struggle? And I know we've talked about all the positives, but where do they struggle? Where do you see that executives are struggling the most when it comes to getting their head around this new world of AI? I mean, we live in the future, don't we? So
yeah, I think the confidence word is actually interesting here because I think one of the challenges is that there can be some ego that is different from confidence, I would say, in this space. That is a feeling that there's nothing else to learn. And I think that can really impede you as a leader and get in the way of you adopting the right technology for your use cases and for your organization. If you go in with the mindset of, I already use AI and already know everything there is to know about it, so I won't spend more time sort of expanding my notion of certain areas around AI transformation, then you won't get the benefit that you have in mind. So I think that's one thing, like really being open to continuous learning and seeing where you can make improvements in your organization and evaluate different kinds of AI and different technologies, maybe not AI, that might make sense for your use case. So just dropping the ego a bit can help a lot. So that's one challenge in the space. And then another, I think, is over-engineering. So if you have a problem that you're trying to solve, immediately going for a very complex AI solution when it's not necessary, which could cost you in infrastructure and in token usage and in additional support when it goes wrong, engineering hours to build it out. Like, it's just not necessary a lot of the time. And you could start with something more simple, more straightforward, easier to manage, easier to govern as well, and to keep track of and to measure success, and then build off of that. So I think there's an excitement to use, whatever the latest thing is that they're seeing, or to build something that is completely agentic and no humans involved and solving everything about their organization that they have in mind, rather than a very specific core problem that they know exactly how it needs to work, and focusing on using AI to solve that and then adding in pieces to build on.
yeah, no, another point that is a trend, right? There is a almost an over ambition at times when companies get super excited about AI. But it's interesting. One thing we're seeing more and more, and a term that we bandy around internally is your intelligence specific, right? Does it actually apply to your specific problem, your specific need, your specific business case, as opposed to, like you say, trying to hit bullseye with a all-consuming solution on day one, which has so much risk for organizations. And it's interesting you say about the kind of beginner's mindset. I feel like that's a polite way to put it, Allegra, right? That executives need to have a beginner's mindset. Do you find that any obstacles there are because of confidence in using some of the existing sort of chatbots? Like if you've used ChatGPT or Claude and you feel like you're an expert user, is that is that where it comes from? That sort of sense?
I think there are a couple of things. One, yes, from the consumer available applications that are out there, ChatGPT, etc., it can feel like you are very fluent. And you might be. That's totally fair. In a certain type of application, you could be a power user and be super good at building things out for your personal use. So fair enough that people feel really confident in using those tools. So that's one thing. But when you're an organization and you're building at scale and you need to be production ready and you have customers on the line and your business reputation and real financial risk, what works for you as a personal user of ChatGPT is completely different from what would work for your whole business at scale in a sustainable and resilient way that is beyond just that potential chat application layer. Like we said, there are many different kinds of AI. You could be using machine learning algorithms to do predictive forecasting or something along those lines, or you could be building out sentiment analysis if you're trying to figure out what product features to build. There are so many different ways to use this technology, data analysis, whatever it may be, that is not just chatting with a model as an individual. So I think understanding the difference between personal use as a consumer and enterprise scale production ready usage is one thing that sort of gets in the way of this confidence. And then the other part is just the very reality of when you're speaking about your organization publicly, especially if you're a public company, you need to know or you need to sound like you know what you're talking about, which I totally understand. But when you're having, direct conversations or you bring peers together, which is why we offer a peer format for our program, the challenges come out more genuinely. People are able to discuss what they're actually seeing in their industry. They can be a lot more honest about what's working and what's not working. And I think that's extremely important. So, whatever you need to say publicly, I totally understand, but allow space for connecting with peers and very honestly sharing challenges so that we can learn from one another as we're all navigating this new space.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point. That one, it's new. I mean, machine learning has been around for a very long time, but I think what the cultural impetus around AI is the sort of 3 year ago ChatGPT moment, right, where people have seen how LLMs can mimic language so powerfully. And it's interesting because you often look to organizations and you see that they're looking for experts in AI, let's say, and their framing of what expertise means is kind of the old world of technology. It's like, I need someone who's been doing this for 20 years in an industry that arguably is not 20 years mature, at least in its current form. So I think it's a really interesting point about being open to learn from others and kind of just having that humility, right? To be a beginner's mind and to be incremental and be open to sharing wins and losses, right?
Yeah. And one of the other things that we do to help people understand where the vulnerabilities would be going from like a consumer application to your organization is we test them using tools that they might use every day. So let's say that you use ChatGPT or use Claude and you're starting to do some actual work for your organization or some industry research. Doing that and taking note of the differences between models, differences between providers, where you spot vulnerabilities in a domain that you know really well. So not just focusing on one application, but like sort of stress testing many so that when you go in to start putting this into your organization and you're expecting your workforce to use these tools or you're expecting to scale this, you're able to see where these models are a little bit less effective, where they're strong. So having a comparison around what's out there is really important. So I think meeting people where they are, very frequently using the tools that are readily available and that people are gravitating towards, but then helping people see where those tools work and where they don't work and where it might not make sense for a large organization to use.
Yeah, no, governance and data access and how AI is actually being used, I think is a whole area which I think we could dedicate a whole podcast to. But it's a really interesting area because a lot of companies are already actively using AI, whether they like it or not, because their teams are. And that should be something that's a bit of a wake-up call for every company out there, which is this world is happening. Shadow AI, I guess is how some people term it. So how do we own and control AI use across our business, right? Because there are insurance obligations, there are legal obligations, there are commercial obligations for companies to actually really lean into understanding how AI is being used, and then hopefully wielding it in a way that can have, really great positive returns for them. So I think it's a really interesting point that the catalyst is probably learning, education, but there are lots of other catalysts too. And education is probably the softest on-ramp, the voluntary one in some respects, right? So
yeah, I mean, you mentioned shadow AI and shadow IT. This has sort of always been the case because, yeah, the gap of understanding sometimes between the ones making decisions in an organization and the ones that are in the weeds day to day. If you've ever been, an employee, you sort of are very aware of the difference in sort of what is happening in your actual work and what is coming from the top. So I think bridging that is really important, especially around AI use. So instead of saying nobody is allowed to use AI in this organization, rather having very strong policies around AI usage and hearing what people are using AI for, that's an opportunity. So if you're seeing that a lot of your organization is, using solutions that have not been signed off, and they're using it in their personal time, what are they using those things for? So instead of it being a penalty for using AI, trying to learn where people are using these tools to be more effective in their work, because that might mean that you need to revisit which vendors you're currently working with, which solutions you have available in your enterprise, maybe think about what features need to be built internally for people to be more successful. All of this is an opportunity for learning to improve your internal operations and to better serve your customers. So instead of penalizing people for trying to do their work better using the tools that are out there, taking that as an opportunity for seeing what you need to offer your workforce, and then having strong policies around the most secure and correct ways to use those tools.
brilliant, brilliant. Just to move on to a question that I really wanted to get in, which is the audience is going to be hearing a lot about confidence and learning and beginner's mindset. I think all really, really positive things. But if you were to give one piece of advice or principle to the business leaders listening in now around how they can actually turn their AI strategy or their insights they have about their organization into confident execution, what's the framework or advice that you might offer?
Yeah, the most important thing I think leaders need to have is a definition of success. You will not be able to be successful if you can't define what that is. And I do think, beginner's mindset is important, but back to the leadership aspect, these are not beginners in what it takes to be a leader. They are very senior. They've gone through this before. They should know a lot about their organization and what will make it successful, what it needs in the next 5-10 years to scale and be resilient. So how do you define those goals and objectives really clearly? And then how do you figure out which technology will help you achieve that in the most effective way? And being able to measure that. Because if you're just going after a general productivity or you're just going after the latest technology that you've seen, that will not help you reach your goals. Seemingly, or, supposedly organizations have KPIs and they have financial goals that they're trying to hit, and you can break those down and reverse engineer them into the right solutions and the right projects to start with and opportunities. But if you're not able to clearly articulate what you need for your business to be successful, you just can't be. So I think that's the most key takeaway that somebody could have, is really focusing on their definitions of success.
I think it's an excellent piece of advice and something we see firsthand a lot. We have a rule. We will not work with a company that doesn't have a clear business case of what success looks like, because it can just be a total mess. I think you're absolutely right, Allegra. Like, these notions of productivity are, nobody understands what they mean in most organizations.
They're not the only measurement. You can start to work on improving your infrastructure. If you're trying to be, AI native in the future or have a lot of the infrastructure in place for AI use cases, you might need to start now if you haven't already. And those are long-term projects that need to be built on top of. And that can take years potentially, depending on where you are now. And that is valuable. It is, platform work and it is infrastructure, and that is extremely valuable for whatever use case you want to put together in the future. So that sort of capability building, I think, is undervalued and sort of always has been. I come from a background of working on data engineering and platform engineering teams, and we're always sort of the underdogs that it's hard to build a business case around something that you don't see the immediate monetary value in the next 6 months. You might see it in years, but you are building a very resilient backbone for all of the use cases of the organization. So I think understanding that, it's always been true, but understanding it for AI is also extremely relevant for leaders.
Brilliant, brilliant. Brings us to our quickfire round, Allegra. I feel like I've stolen a lot of your time already. The first question we love to ask in this quickfire round is, where do you see the biggest AI opportunity right now for businesses?
Yeah, good question. I do think that it is in understanding their data in a more clear way. We have business intelligence tooling out there, and it's becoming better and better with AI, especially using things like natural language processing and LLMs to understand and access your data. I think it's fair to say that data governance is still an ongoing challenge for a lot of teams. So if we can use AI to better understand where we have gaps in our data, where it's working for us, where it's not, how to democratize data access as well within organizations, I think that's a really strong use case.
Brilliant, brilliant, excellent. And then moving on, if you had one short piece of advice for leaders in terms of not only getting started, but being successful when it comes to implementing AI, what would you suggest? I think the advice you gave already around knowing what success looks like is really, really helpful. But I guess once you've gone beyond that point, what is the next big tick box that every organization should really have to be successful?
Yeah, AI success is not a one-person journey. It takes your entire organization and it takes a lot of alignment. So I would say looking for a shared language and a shared understanding amongst your executive team around what AI is, having that literacy across everybody that's leading the organization, having a shared understanding of the AI vision and the strategy as well is extremely important. So it's not just one executive, it's not just the CEO saying we're going to be AI first now. Everybody that's leading multiple departments within the organization, from the CTO to CMO, whatever team it is, they need to be on the same level of core literacy and that alignment of what the plan is with AI in order for it to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of intuitive sense. You've got to bring along the executive team, right? Otherwise, people will be pushing in different directions, and alignment is such a big part of succeeding. So I think it's an excellent piece of advice. Moving on to our last question. So just to make it a little lighter, we typically like to see how we can offer the audience some extra value, paying it forward. Would you recommend any sort of books or good blogs or any sort of media or materials that you feel have really helped you with your own mental models and also in particular around kind of grounding yourself when it comes to AI?
Yeah, so I have to say our newsletter. We do have a bi-weekly newsletter that we've been writing for almost 2 years now. It's extremely well researched. We put a lot of effort into it. It is completely free, and we cover not just technical concepts, but also societal impact. It's always business relevant. We talk about geopolitics. It's a wide range, and we try to distill down the most relevant information from the last couple of weeks for leaders so that they don't have to, drink from the fire hose of AI and the open internet. So that's one. Also, I have to shout out the MLOps community, which is my favorite technical information. It is a global community of machine learning engineers and adjacent engineering roles. And there's so much amazing content for real use cases, the way engineers are actually deploying AI right now, what's working, what's not. Many, virtual conferences that have been fully recorded, tons of podcasts. So if you're trying to get more into the technical side of things and understand what's possible, that is the one I recommend.
I think both pieces of advice are amazing, and yeah, I think so many people are going to get great value from those nuggets. So thank you so much, Allegra. I've had good fun. I hope you have too.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, all the best, and yeah, excited to watch what's happening with Lumiera. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.